different cultures, different communities. I live in Canada and Vancouver, and as Frank introduced me, my background is in performance, is in storytelling, and deeply rooted in the high places. It's so nice to see another storyteller here. I haven't seen him for a while. Anyway, I come back and forth from Cayman Island. Frank and I have known each other for a few decades. Now, what I need to do now is, I imagine you're all quite curious, about story. How does it work? What are we actually talking about? It's difficult to understand it, because Frank's been talking about particularities, about the particularities of Cayman Island in your society here. Now, what I do is move more into the abstract, the conceptual, the metaphorical. Now, the only way to really help you see how our method is intended to work is to tell you a story. So I'm going to start with just one short story. I have another story, but I think this one is a very important story. And it's a story that could be much longer, but in the interest of time, I'll keep it short. And this story begins a long, long time ago, in a place far, far away, in a land occupied by witches and warlocks. And one day, the elders of this land were sitting around complaining. There had been no new ideas for a long time, and they felt that the young people needed to get out there and tell them, give us some new magic potions, some new spells, some new casts. We want to see some good transformations. We're old, we're tired. So even though this conversation went on for a long time, this conversation's like that, well, I can't tell it to you because we don't have time. But at the end of the conversation, the elders had made a decision that they would gather the young people in a conference, and they would challenge them to come up with the scariest, the spookiest, the most horrifying magic potion or spell or transformation, because of course transformation is the job of witches and warlocks. So the day of the conference arrives. Everybody's very, very excited. All the young witches and warlocks are nervous and anxious. People have come from all over, and the presentations were phenomenal. They went on all day, but I don't have time to tell you what actually happened there. So we'll get to the end of that conference. In the very last presentation, there was a young witch. She was shy. She wasn't even sure she was going to get up there and do her thing. But the elders persuaded her, oh, go, go, go. This is what this conference is here. We want to hear your ideas. No ideas, not good enough for us. So she gets on the stage, and she introduces herself, and she says, there's been so much amazing stuff happened this week. I only have a story. I just have a story to tell you. And the younger witches and warlocks in the audience, they kind of snipped it. Story. Some of them had turned spiders into dragons, and all sorts of wonderful things that I don't have time to tell you about. So she tells her story. And as she's telling her story, the faces of people in the audience, they are truly horrified. And remember, this competition is to come up with the most horrifying, unspeakable, unthinkable, scary thing. So she tells her story. Before she's even finished, the elders get up and say, stop, 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 you have won. This story is horrifying, just stop. So she stops the story. She doesn't even get to the end. And they give her the prize, and they shake her hand and pat her on the back and say, okay. Now the most elder of the elders stood up and said, wait 1 second. Before you leave, young lady, you have won this prize. But before you leave, you must take that story back. We don't need that story around here. That's a horrifying story. Take it back. And the young woman says, I can't take the story back. Once the story's told, it can never be untold. And this is the power of story, in case you doubt how powerful stories are. But even more, not only must we be careful about the stories we tell, because we cannot take them back, we must be very careful about the stories we listen to equally. Okay, so you got a bit of an idea about the power of story? Yeah. So now you're interested in how I actually work with story? How this would actually fit in to Frank and my collaboration? Okay. There's a story that I use, that I work with, that I'm going to work with you people with. Okay? It's the best way to do it. And it's the story called How I Came to Be Here. Now, it's a perfect story. Everybody has it. We all of us, have a story that tells us how we came to be here together at this moment in this room. Right? Now, stories are so powerful and so perfect because there's no doubt Quincy will tell you the magic is in their simplicity. Every story has a beginning, every story has a middle, and every story has an end. And that's all you really need to know to begin to create a story. So let's stop for a second and reflect. Just reflect for a minute. What would be the moment in your life, the beginning of the story that brings you here today, right now. Let's take a moment. Now for me, one would think that logically, my story begins 1988 on 7 Mile Beach, a young tourist girl from Canada, taking some time off from my PhD, that was it, I just started my PhD, so I was taking a little holiday, girlfriend brought me down to Cayman. I'm sitting on 7 Mile Beach, the soca music's coming down, this is the old Holiday Inn, how many of you remember the old Holiday Inn? Yeah, we remember that. And who should walk down the beach but a very handsome young man, and ask me where I'm from. I could tell you a very good story, but you know what? It's not the right story for this particular occasion, because it doesn't end us up here. And it was 23 years ago, okay? But obviously, in that story, that beginning, there was a connection. Frank and I were moved by a common passion for injustice and inequities, and the power of performance, the power of music and theater. At that time, I said I was writing a PhD, Frank was writing One Black, One White in his head. That was interesting. I saw him go from his head to paper. Oh. Anyway, not the right beginning. And the beginning of your story is really, really important. When I work with people, they often say, Erika, I don't know where to begin, just get me started. And I say, no, I can't start your story. It's got to be yours. You've got to find the beginning. So let's start again. When you're looking for the beginning of a story, and you can't find it, because there could be so many, what you want to focus on is your purpose. Okay, so what's my purpose here today? That'll be my next question. What is your purpose here today? What moves you to be here in this room discussing about the things we're discussing? For me, I know my purpose clearly. I'm almost 60. It takes a long time to find your purpose. But my purpose here today is clearly a concern for injustice, a concern for voicelessness, a concern, and in any context, well, Frank can bring the particularities of Cayman Island. Story works anywhere, anywhere. Everyone has it. Okay, so for me, I know my purpose is injustice, and my purpose is a passion for performance. And I know where my story begins. It begins many years before I came to Cayman Island. Many, many years before I met Frank. It begins when I was young. And indeed, I was profiled. I was a youth at risk. I was pregnant when I was 15 years old. Kicked out of school, kicked out of my home. Okay? Now, you can see where the purpose for justice comes from that kind of experience, right? So, we need the middle of my story. We begin it when I'm young with an experience of injustice, which can fuel passion. What happens in the middle of stories is that's where you confront your challenges and your obstacles. And all of you to be here right now went through a challenge and an obstacle, okay? See, this is the other wonderful thing about story that I didn't quite say. You're all listening to me so nicely. A story creates that identification, you know, listener and teller. And no story means anything without a listener. You must listen. Okay, so we take me back to the beginning, experience of injustice. A single, pregnant teenager with no husband. Now, we all can shake our heads. What are those obstacles? We know, we're educated now, right? I had economic obstacles, social obstacles, discrimination. We all know the story of the single mother teenager, right? Doesn't matter where you work. If you're interested in youth, you know that story. It's not a good thing. Wrong. Wrong. There's nothing wrong with being a single teenage mother. What is wrong is the obstacles that society puts in front of you to ensure that you will be punished. These are punitive measures. These are not transformative solutions. Make it damn hard for me to get an education. You know, make me raise my children with minimum wage jobs, pulling a beer. Because you got to work at night when you're a single mother. You got to be home during the day. Okay? So clearly I can see my challenges and obstacles. Are you guys curious as to how I overcame them?
Yeah.
I don't have time to tell you. But buy me a drink. Okay. Now what about, but let's get back. So that's the middle of the story. Okay. So now what about the end? Have you guys found your beginning? I hope you are thinking about your own story. Think of your purpose, the middle, the obstacles, the challenges, and actually in that purpose of when you negotiate your way around the challenges, that's where you find your values. Your values are seated by the obstacles and challenges that you have overcome in your story. Okay? Now the end of the story. And I have 5 more minutes. And the beautiful thing about being a storyteller is there's no script. So I can make it in 5 minutes, no problem. The end of the story. The end of the story we're all here right now with our purpose. And what are we doing in this room?